the ghosts in our mansion. Living in a Victorian mansion comes with a lot of problems. A bloody history is one of them, and the ghosts are the biggest problem, because our mansion is haunted as hell, and I mean it. However, after some time of living here, you learn how to deal with it. For example, we have the butcher, who walks around on the first floor at night. He will offer you food, but you should never accept it. As long as you remember that, you will be fine. Other spirits are trickier. The Prowler, as we call him, used to be a child who was murdered here. Something about an illegitimate child or something. Anyway, you can sometimes hear him inside the walls, knocking and scratching. If you stand still too long, he comes out of the wall and will try to drag you into the wall. He will try to chase you into a dead end where you'll be defenseless. However, if you sing a song or something, it will go away. My favorite ghost in the house is the chainer. At night you hear the rattling of chains all around the house. Sometimes the sound changes to chains being dragged. According to my parents, the chainer was a woman who was tortured or something. If you see her, you have to turn around and walk away, like you haven't seen her. Avoid looking at her or touching the chains that will appear all around you. It's really easy once you figure it out. See, the first year living here with my parents was really scary, but after some time I learned all the tricks to deal with the ghosts. But hearing from the screaming down below, I can tell that the burglar who just entered our house doesn't know. The salt circle. Protect me from the ghost. They all told me to take salt with me if I ever entered the haunted mansion on Drury Lake Lane, past the corner Brook Street. It is a beautiful haunted mansion. Every trope you can think of that makes up a haunted mansion, well, this place had it all. I was in love with it the first time I saw it, and I was definitely taking pictures. I heard that the ghost that haunted this mansion usually comes out at 3 a.m., and when it nears to 3 a.m., you are to go to any spot and circle out a salted circle and basically stay inside the salted circle. Salt is the protection. I love haunted houses, and they are just amazing, don't you think? And I don't know, haunted houses have this thing about them. They have atmosphere, a history, and a story, which a new house doesn't have. Anyway, as I was taking pictures, and I was definitely staying way after 3 a.m., and I had torchlights and other necessities with me to urge me to soldier on. Even the smell of this old mansion was better than any perfume I had ever smelled. I have always been one for history, I guess. The first odd thing I did notice was that in some rooms of the mansion, there were other well-aged salt circles with skeletons inside them. I took pictures of them, and I thought they looked awesome, and no, I wasn't scared. Then as it neared 3 a.m., I made my salt circle, and I stood inside it with so much anticipation. And as I prepared my camera to take pictures, my camera went funny and switched off. Oh darn, I thought to myself, but I guess memory will be enough to see this ghost. Everything went dead quiet, and in a moment there was nothing. And then this ghost appeared in front of me, It looked at my salt circle and just smiled at me. It then showed me the head of some man it had decapitated and then tried to aggressively attack me, but the salt circle protected me. The ghost then calmed down and sat down on the floor while making random strange noises, and hours went by. But this ghost wasn't leaving me. Even in the morning, this ghost was still here, and I had some salt left, and I tried to make other salt circles next to mine, and I got to the entrance of the room, but ran out of salt. The ghost is laughing at me. I then thought about the skeletons inside the other salt circles around the mansion. This ghost is a patient one. It knows I will get hungry, or I will eventually die. I have some food, but not a lot. The ghost is just doing weird random things, and even tempting me with some hot food. Don't come to this haunted mansion. The Caretaker. The journey out to the shoals in the middle of winter is long, cold, and lonely. Ever so lonely. You begin to imagine that you're leaving humanity behind, that you're sailing on toward the literal end of the world. And you're not wrong. I had to get special permission to visit then, for my book about New Hampshire ghost stories, and then I had to charter the boat to take me out of Portsmouth and into the Atlantic. It seemed like an eternity until we arrived, but we finally did. The wind rose up as I stepped onto the dock, slicing through my jacket and my bones. I was immediately struck by the sense of death over everything, the sense of grayness and decay, the sense that this is where people go to die. I tried to shake off the feeling and headed up the path to the Oceanic, the last of the great hotels that had once dotted these islands. I was going to meet Fred Haling, the caretaker. The principal spooky stories I came to hear and see about were Blackbeard, whose ghost apparently haunted these islands, the problem being that he never made it this far north, and the many spirits in the Oceanic itself. It had been fun, half history and half creative writing, residual hauntings, and that sort of thing. The first night, Fred told me that the only ghosts he'd experienced were psychological. Loneliness. He was nice enough, though, to tell an old ghost story. Details were hazy, but supposedly a sailor had left his bride on the island, swearing he'd return to her after he finished his voyage, which, of course, he never did. He died overseas, and when news got back to the young woman, she flung herself into the sea. No names or dates, of course, but it was a good, if cliched story, and I made a note to check on it when I got back to Portsmouth. I wandered around the island each day, intermittently, helping Fred with chores, but mostly I was on my own. I heard nothing but the cry of the gulls and the crash of the waves. I felt nothing but the chill of the wind. I saw nothing but the gray of branch and bramble, of sky and sea. A voice rose up, like the wind, saying again that this was the end. This was the end of the world. By Sunday, I was more than ready to leave. The boat was to pick me up that morning, and I woke up early to meet it. No boat came that morning. When I ran back to see Fred Haling, he and every sign of him were gone. I was alone, alone with the wind and the waves, alone with the screaming from the sea. I think that was when I realized it. Oh, how I roared with laughter when I realized it. No boat had come. No boat would ever come. Not now. She and I are alone. Don't get a mortgage from the Garrett Group. 5 years ago, I was desperate for a mortgage, and I really wanted to buy a house. No banks would accept me, as I was earning too low and not enough savings. Then I found a bank, which I hadn't seen before, among the more mainstream banks. I'm not sure if it was a bank, but they offered mortgages to anyone. They were called the Garrett Group, and they were a financial company delving into many financial elements. They accepted me straight away, and they gave me a £300,000 mortgage with low interest and low mortgage repayments. It was incredible, and I bought a 3-bedroom house with that. I moved my family in, and everything was going smooth. And with every mortgage payment every month, strange things started happening, like scratchings on the wall and things moving around. This house was a new build, and so it should not be haunted at all. There was nothing buried under the house like dead bodies, or otherwise the police would have been called, and so these strange happenings were unusual. You expect these type of things in old buildings, but not in new buildings. It was still livable and more of an annoyance than anything else. Then I started to realize that it was when my monthly mortgage payment was made, was when strange things would happen. The lower my mortgage became, the more absurd and hard to explain things would happen around the house. We then started hearing noises around the house, and shadow-like creatures forming and walking around. Things were becoming more physical when my children would be dragged around on their bedroom floor. Then things would calm. It would only happen when my mortgage was becoming less every month, and the house is new and doesn't have any history right now, as my family is the first family, and so we are making history. Then I went online, where only people who had attained a mortgage from the Garrett Group could sign in, and I read things which made me cold to the core. People were saying that these mortgages that the Garrett Group were giving away were a wall of some sort, which had entrapped menacing creatures from other worlds. When the walls get chipped away slowly by mortgage payments every month, these creatures are able to escape a little, until one day they will escape entirely when the mortgage is paid off. People talked about the unusual happenings when mortgage payments get paid every month. It's because the wall that is the mortgage is getting smaller. The smaller it gets, the more activity we will have. As an experiment, I didn't pay my mortgage 1 month, and nothing unusual happened. Then one guy published a post on the Garrett Mortgages online group, and it read, "One last mortgage payment till my mortgage is paid off." It was nice knowing all of you. I'm always watching. I'm an omnipresent force, so long as you're in my domain. I'm uncaring and indifferent, or I was. It all started months ago. They moved into the house. It wasn't a particularly spectacular house. It had sat empty for years. At first they seemed like the perfect couple, a man and a woman. She was pregnant, a smiling lady, fat with life. Oh, fuck. That smile. Ear to ear, bare teeth, all within the red border of her meticulously applied lipstick, not a smudge in sight. At first I was angry with her. How fake she is with the others. Why doesn't she say something? When the door gets slammed shut, she was slammed into the walls. Why doesn't she leave? But I quickly learned the truth. She was a prisoner there, like me, and the baby in her belly. It went on day after day. It was so horrible, I don't even want to describe it. But it woke me up. I had to wait weeks. Omnipresence isn't omnipotence. I was powerless until he finally got off his drunken ass and got to work. The moment the hammer broke the wall, I was released. The game begun. From the hole in the wall, I released a barely audible, whirring sound. It immediately caught his attention. He took a step back and stared at the wall for hours. It was torture, and he deserved it. I wanted to keep him there for eternity, but she came in. She got scared. John, what's wrong? Why do you care, lady? I don't understand you humans. She pestered him for maybe 5 minutes before she ran away, in some sort of fear. This was my chance, and I took it. I changed my pitch to something more eerie, more hypnotic. It's impossible to translate it entirely, but the gist of my message was this. The wallpaper. Tear it off. And so he did, violently. Rip, rip, rip. He ripped it off the wall. And once again took a step back to look at my canvas. The blood-splattered walls. Me, a victim, myself, years ago. The evidence of my death covered by the paper. I was wiped from history. I never got any justice. It turned me inhuman and bitter. But enough about me. My focus is on him, John. I wanted to retaliate for that woman. I wanted to get her the payback I never received. But I contained myself. His wails would haunt her. She'd never escape him. I couldn't curse her that way. It had to be quick and painless. Crack. One motion, one time. Neck broken, he fell to the ground. She never left the house. I don't know why. Maybe she couldn't afford anything else. Nevertheless, she's doing better now. I'm helping her when I can. She doesn't know. I don't care. He released me from behind the wallpaper. But I'm not leaving. Not yet. Wicked Haunted House. So it's up here on the left. Charles, pull over here. Nadine says to Charles, who is driving his SUV towards the supposed haunted house. Here, you mean? Easily, this is the least scary house on the block. Really, this looks like my grandma's crib, he says to Nadine and her friend Cheryl, who came along. Yanking each other out of the car, the two women both look absolutely giddy with excitement to tour the first haunted house on their special Halloween night tour. Locally, this place is known as Madame Nully's house. I mean, really, come on. This is just the first house. Cheryl said that they have it open specially for tonight, Nadine says to Charles, smiling seductively and obviously knowing what she is doing to him in that nurse costume that she wore. This is really silly, ladies. There is an actual scary serial killer out there, according to the news, and you want to check out these haunted houses? And I don't even see what's cool about this one, he says to Cheryl, who looked a bit more interested in the actual history of the house, judging by her reading the story of it on her phone. Hey, this was the home of Madame Nully. Exactly on this day in 1923, she was said to have died under mysterious circumstances. Knowing that he wouldn't see his dear Nully anymore, the husband was driven absolutely crazy and stayed that way up until his death in the 1970s. Cheryl says as Nadine jumps up and down, begging the other two to go inside. I guess that's really spooky, ladies, Charles says, smiling, finding it hard not to smile and stare at the two beautiful UMass juniors. Luckily, Charles met these two at a party 2 weeks ago, even though he had already graduated college the year before. Looks like they used to rent this house out as an Airbnb. Eventually, they say if you stay in the guest bedroom after midnight, you can hear the spooky whispers of Madame Nully asking for a cup of tea. Really? I hope this gets scarier, you two, he says. Come on. Of course it gets scarier, goofball. Oh, can you imagine hearing a ghost voice in the middle of the night? Oh, I would absolutely freak, Cheryl says, smiling at Charles while Nadine runs through the house. Looking at the actual guest room, Charles thinks it would be funny to whisper that silly phrase when they walk by it. You there? Care for a spot of tea, ladies? Charles says in his most exaggerated ghost lady accent. Oh! The two ladies scream and bolt out the house laughing. Sweet. All right. Come on, ladies. Let's go to a second location, Charles says while the trio head back to the car. Two of them, temporarily carefree. The apartment. Before I moved to my little apartment in the city, whenever I thought of a haunted house, my first thought would be some kind of creepy old mansion, a big ancient house that would stand out like a sore thumb between the warm and welcoming village houses. Of course, that would be my first thought. I've seen too many horror movies for my own good. Whenever I saw one such mansion, be it while driving through a deserted city at dusk or walking through the woods at dawn, I could feel the eyes of its ghostly residents on me. I'd imagine a gruesome story about its history, one that would leave it haunted with the deceased spirits of its former residents, begging to be set free. I would swoop in and release them, be the hero of the day, the gossip of the afterlife, if such a thing existed. I could feel the spirits of the house trying to lure me in, to make me fulfill those words. And then I'd have passed the house, and my dreams and fantasies would forever remain just that. Of course, like most people, I'm not the hero I'm trying to make you believe. I'm just your ordinary office worker. I have my way with words and an imagination to back them up. But when word comes to deed, I'll be the first to run. Recently, I moved to my little apartment in a flat on a pretty busy street. The flat is really welcoming and tidy. The apartment is nothing too fancy, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen and living room fused together. It has a bit of an old-fashioned theme, just how I like it. The doors look older than the building and maybe just a bit unwelcoming, and thus my apartment stands out when you walk down the corridor like a sore thumb. I like it that way. It makes it special. The building itself is quite new, just over a decade old, and looks pretty modern. The doors are sometimes a bit confusing, but it could just be that I'm overworked. Every time I come home, It's like they've switched places. There are only 3, one to my bedroom, one to my bathroom, and one to the hallway, but I can never seem to remember which is which. I can often laugh about it, but on days like today, when I've had a long work day, I just want to go straight to my bedroom and sleep. It has its many quirks, and some are more than strange. Electronics that randomly glitch, only in the apartment. Weird noises, things falling. I can live with it, but the last few days these quirks have been getting stranger and creepier. Like now, for example, the lights are flickering again, and there's an uneasy chill down my spine. With the dim and flickering lighting, my small apartment looks much larger and feels much grander and older. Almost like a mansion. Sam, the imaginary friend. My daughter used to have an imaginary friend. She called him Sam. Sam was a mischievous boy, according to her, and my daughter would always blame things on him. Mostly it was, "Stop leaving water cups out," and "Please keep the bathroom door closed." My daughter would always say, and I quote, "I didn't do it. Sam did." I was always the imaginative kid, too, so I didn't give it much thought. At the same time, Gus would always say either, "Your house must have rats," "I hear something in the walls," or they thought it was haunted. When my daughter was 5, I had my sister stay the night. She woke up in the middle of the night screaming. She said she saw a little boy with stringy black hair and buggy eyes staring at her. She had a history of sleep paralysis, so I dismissed her and went back to sleep. By the time my daughter was 8, she still had Sam, but apparently they had gotten into an argument. I heard her screaming and came running in. She called him a no-good craphead, which shocked me, as I didn't even know where she learned those words. When I asked, she said, "Sam wants to sleep in here with me. He needs to stay in the walls." When further pressed about the argument, she said it was about Sam not wanting to live in the wall anymore. I blamed the swearing from kids at school and the argument as an excuse to test them out. Then one day, she was 12. She still believed in Sam, and I was starting to get concerned, although their relationship had mended since the incident, apparently. My daughter was staying at a friend's house for the weekend, and I had just gotten back from work. Something wasn't right. As I passed through the house, I noticed all of my daughter's old habits of leaving cups out and the bathroom door open. I went to take a whiz and noticed a puddle around the toilet. That wasn't me. Then I heard the microwave go off as I left the bathroom. I pulled a hammer from my tool belt and went to the kitchen. To my horror, I see a smallish child crawl out of the wall and look at me. He had stringy hair and buggy eyes. "Hey, mister. Pleased to finally meet you. I'm Sam." This house is not haunted. I bite my lip, ignoring the sweat dripping into my eyes, as I slowly, carefully... Fuck! The fishing line snaps and the heavy iron chains slam into the floorboards with a loud crash. Paul calls out, asking if I'm okay from the other room. "Yeah, think we need to go with the 150-pound test. These chains are heavy as hell." Added to the list, which is growing longer by the minute, I might add. "Trapdoor not working out, huh?" Not so much. I don't understand how he can still be so cheerful. 6 months ago, when Paul and I started this business, it seemed like a molehill. Now it loomed over us like Everest, intimidating, insurmountable, lethal. I stomped to the kitchen and grabbed a beer from the mini-fridge. Fuck the realtor who had lied about the house's history. Fuck the normal, all-American families and their lack of murder-suicides and violent home invasions and serial killings. Fuck this house for not being haunted already. Those paranormal shows paid piles of cash to let their idiot film crews scare people with garbled, static, and editing room jump scares. They'd wander the halls, heavy rigs strapped to their chest in order to capture their faces in shades of green, searching for proof. After so many seasons and so many varieties on the same format, you'd think they'd give up. But people still look for Bigfoot and Nessie, so I guess I can't fault them too much. Anything to make a buck, right? So my best friend Paul and I decided to capitalize on that fad, as well as the other opportunities, like Halloween or a novel bed and breakfast. We put out feelers for a haunted house for sale, and wouldn't you know it, there was one nearby. It was our fault we got suckered. Should have done our own research into its history. Now we're stuck with an unhaunted house that represents every red cent we both had to our names. We're trying to rig the house. We ripped out the drywall to install all kinds of contraptions that would spook and thrill. But we're office dwellers, and I barely knew how to hold a hammer when we started. And we can't contract out the work for obvious reasons. I finish my beer. Tastes so good I have a second, then a third. By the time I notice, the mini-fridge is empty, and I'm surrounded by fallen soldiers. The house swims around me. I hear Paul's humming from the other room, some catchy pop tune that grates against the inside of my skull. The collection letters are becoming more insistent, almost threatening. Yesterday, there was an eviction notice on my door, and the lights didn't work. I've gotten pretty good at using the hammer over the last few months. That incessant humming has turned to whistling, shrill and taunting, the overture to our failure, our ruin. No, this house is not haunted. Yet. This last story is a bit of comic relief. The abandoned bus terminal. People ask me, what's the most haunted place in America? Or if I know any haunted places. And I say, why, yes, I do. And the place I refer to is Craster's Falls, a small town in northern Illinois. The location, a small abandoned bus terminal. The haunted location inside the terminal is the woman's bathroom. You see, back in 1986, a cult secluded themselves inside the ladies' restroom and sacrificed 2 virgin women and offered their flesh and their stool to their demon god. You see, I guess a virgin's fresh steamy stool is stronger in summoning a demon, so that's why they chose that method and location. The cult was trying to raise Stoolzabob, the demon of shit, and all other evil excrements in the underworld. Along with the 2 sacrificed women were the 5 cult members themselves. Jars of urine and feces were found next to each body. Their causes of death were rumored to be the destruction of the anus cavity with a red-hot poker. Quite the way to warm yourself on a cold winter's night. Also, On the walls were written, "Receive these sacrifices from the bowel to rain feces all over the world. Our odious master, Stoolzabob." These charming words were written in blood and feces, of course. Needless to say, after that frightening display, the woman's bathroom was haunted from that day out. From strange phenomena of people crapping their pants for no reason, to even a few people dying from uncontrollable diarrhea. The terminal was finally closed and condemned. The scary thing is they announced the demolition of the old building and the new construction of a new terminal. So if you're ever in the new bathroom and out of nowhere you crap your pants, or you smell a demon feces that smells like it's been roasting in a 1,000-year-old burlap sack, you might want to run, because Stoolzabob has arrived to pay you a visit. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember, you can find me on Instagram at duchessof.darkness or duchessofdark N2 on Twitter. Also, please send me your stories or poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. Until next time.